Hello and welcome back to Great Deltan. Firstly, apologies for the lack of content. I wanted to get to a certain point with what I've been doing before I release the next update video, so I'd actually have enough to talk about. Back when we spoke last, I had recently moved into my new house, which I now own and isn't rented, and was basically introducing the idea of a new layout and gave a small tour of the space to be used for this project. Back in early January, I began building the baseboard structure, and as you can see, I have made quite a bit of progress on it in front of me. In today's video, I'm just going to give you an update of where things are at, what's left to do before I can start track laying, and a general plan for the layout with hopeful timescales. So, let's begin with the obvious, and that is the framework you see here in front of us. I started building this in early January, shortly after Christmas, and I've now managed to construct about 3/4 of the way around the garage with just one side and the end to go. The framework is built using stud wall planks, which are readily available from standard hardware stores such as Wickes and B&Q. They're fairly cheap at around £4 for a 2.4 metre length and are pretty nice and easy to work with. They're also strong enough for what I require them. They can be a bit hit and miss, with some having curvature or splits, so it's always important that I give them a good inspection and look down the length of them before I purchase. I've gone for an almost identical build process, with the framework having the studs at the back being attached onto the brickwork and the plaster. And then the horizontals are screwed onto that. The cross bracing is then on the front, and then the horizontals and legs are screwed onto that to support the front edge. The layout does differ in three main ways from the old layout. Number one is that I built this to a bigger height than the previous one. You might already be able to tell by the angle of which the camera is looking at it. This is the standard height which I used to film all of my old videos, and the camera was always above the layout by quite a few, about a foot I think, so this is already quite a bit higher just from the camera angle, you can tell. I've done this not only for storage, but it's also a bit nicer height to work at, so I'm not hunched over the layout so much, especially with the tedious jobs like ballasting and rail painting. The second difference is that this is also a lot wider or deeper than the other layout. If you had watched the introduction video for this layout, you'll know that this garage is about 500mm wider than the previous, so I have taken advantage of that and added around 150mm to each side of the layout, allowing for greater depth and of course more layout space. This still gives me an extra 200mm of space in the operator well too, so I'm not taking up all of the extra space and I have given myself some more room. The last and the main difference of this new build is that I'll be using the open frame method for this layout as opposed to just boarding it all over. I haven't tried this method from scratch, so it will be interesting to see how it goes. With my previous layout, I had an exact track plan in mind, so I was able to build the baseboard specifically tailored to that layout. With this one, I do have a plan in mind, and I have actually drawn it out, which I'll show you later in the video, but I would like a blank canvas in case things change. The open framework technique is far better for building height to a layout as well. If we look under the layout, we can see that I've customised the storage area to maximise the space I have for keeping everything that needs to be in the garage nice and neat. These shelves over here are made at the perfect height to accommodate these storage boxes. Likewise here, I've actually made some rails for these two boxes to actually slide in and out. So maximising more space, and that was a fun little project to do as well. On the opposite side, I need to accommodate a fridge and a freezer along with some more tool storage. So again, I'll need to build some custom height shelves. The main advantage of the taller layout is that I can now store things completely underneath that I couldn't do before, such as my golf clubs and the carpet shampooer. They all fit under there nicely and they don't have to live in the operator well. There shouldn't be a need to keep anything in the well when it's all finished, and I should be completely free from clutter for me to navigate freely. Up there you'll see I have made a large shelf to keep my daughter's old bed, which we are keeping for when my son outgrows his. That's just mainly a mattress and some planks, but it keeps it all out the way. Otherwise that was quite a large item to try and store under the layout. Now here's probably the most interesting part of the build so far, which is my workbench. I hadn't initially planned on building a bench solely for this purpose, but when I realised I'd built the layout tall enough to enclose this completely underneath, it was a no-brainer. I'd always just before use the layout space to do things like stock projects and airbrushing, which of course isn't sustainable as eventually I'll run out of space when I continue to develop the layout. So this area now allows me to keep all the rubbish off the layout. With this layout anyway, it would have been hard to store on top because I wouldn't be boarding it flat anyway. So let's give a quick little tour and explanation of this area. On my left I have my airbrush compressor. That can be permanently set up there, and then I will get an extra long hose extension to be able to get to all areas of the layout without needing to move that compressor. And that shelf is just big enough to store that and the little holder stand for the airbrush. I've never actually had an airbrush stand, so it'd be nice to keep that somewhere and not spill paint all over the boards. Then over here we have my soldering iron, which is just loose at the minute, but I'm going to need to use that in and around the layout to get to all the dropper wires and all the wiring for lights and so forth, so that will just remain loose, but I probably will keep it over there when it's not in use. I've got a couple of other bits as well, just some wires. And then over here will be, well, is my test oval track. I call it a test oval track because it has a specific purpose, which I will show you in a sec. But all it is 8 pieces of Pico set track and then 2 pieces of flexi track. All the fish baits are soldered. Got a couple of dropper wires to add it to the DR5000. Again, I will be using the DR5000 because it's just what I'm used to. And then what this switch is underneath, that switch there isolates this piece of track. And the reason I've done that is because it will be used to test the stay alives that I put in my locos. So I can turn this piece of track on and it's now completely live with the rest of the oval. I can get my stock up to speed, do 2 or 3 laps to charge the supercapacitors that are the consist of a stay alive. And then I can turn that switch off and just see if it coasts to a nice stop, as opposed to just stopping abruptly when the power circuit is cut off. And that would be a good way to test whether the stay alives are functional and whether they're meaty enough as well. Also, at the minute I've got a light up here which is just plugged into an extension lead on top. Just lift that up. But once I wire the entire layout all in, that'll just be on the light switch, so it'll be a lot neater than this. Other than that, really, haven't got too much else. I've got some storage trays down there. I'm just washing the plastic trays at the minute because they're still dirty from when I had flood water. Back when I lived on billing, I've not actually washed them since. So I'm going to be using those for things like people and decoders, blanking plates, track pins, all the tiny little bits and pieces so they don't get lost. This is my entire stock collection currently. I am taking this slow with stock, not only for financial limitations, but also to ensure that I don't fall behind with my stock improvements. We've got the Transpennine Express Mark 5A set from Dapol and Revolution Trains. This was my first set, which I actually got from the guy who bought most of my Mark II layout. He unfortunately had to sell up, so I decided to grab these off him while I had the opportunity, as they're not easy to find nowadays. Secondly, in the back right corner, we have the Class 221 in Avanti West Coast livery. I've been waiting for these Voyagers to be released for the best part of 4 years now, so I jumped at the chance to get one when they finally arrived. Last, we have this Network Rail Engineers train, which consists of a DB Schenker Class 67, 2 Mark II coaches, and then the DVT at the front. I've also got a Graham Farish MEA 46-ton mineral wagon there in a box. I found that after I had sold all of my other stock, so I didn't think there's any point in selling it on its own. I'll just keep it because I probably will recreate that wagon formation again one day. My next videos will be all about improving the stock to the standard I want on this layout, so I've decided to get a few different items to get started with, not all just the same thing. Obviously there is only one freight item on here, being that mineral wagon, but this will mainly be a passenger train based layout. I do also currently have 2 pre-orders with Revolution Trains, being a Class 313 in Network Rail livery and a 1938 Underground set, which I will be using for the branch line. I've also got about 2.5 hours until the deadline for the Class 175/180s closes, so if I decide to get one of those, it will be ordered within the next 2 hours. I've been debating it for the last couple of months because it would be a really nice piece of stock, but I'm trying to keep my expenditure down and it isn't really West Coast mainline. But knowing me, I will probably end up ordering it. So let's talk quickly about the next steps and future of the layout. The first job, of course, will be to finish the framework by extending it all the way down to the door and then across to finish the loop. From there I need to add lighting, sockets, DCC bus wire, 12 volt DC lighting bus and then back scenes before I can start laying the first pieces of track. As this layout is going to have a lot more height to the previous versions, I will work from the bottom up in terms of track laying, as there will be sections that are enclosed within tunnels and then have further track laying to do on top of those tunnels. I think now is probably a good time to show you what the rough plan is for the layout. Here is a sketch which I doodled on a quiet night shift at work. I won't give too much away at this point, as there are some unique and exciting plans in there which I'd like to keep to myself at this point, but the general gist is similar to the old layout, with having an urban side and a rural side split by a back scene halfway. Again, there'll be no fiddle yard, as I find them expensive, space consuming, and just create more running problems with all the points and the curves. We're looking again at a modern southern West Coast mainline era, but anything from post-privatisation in terms of stock. The main addition to this layout will be a branch line with 3 or 4 stations, which I'm most excited to build. A fun feature of the first layout was having the ability to run a train from one station to another. As for the time frame, I'd like to have the baseboard completed and ready for track laying by autumn time. I'll be spending a bit of money upgrading the stock before I continue with the framework, but I'd like to have things ready to go by around August-September time. From there, I guess we spend the next 5 to 10 years building it up. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. I just wanted to give you an update of where I've been. Obviously the content isn't much at the minute because of what I'm doing and how slow I'm taking things, but there will be more to come. The next video I will start my stock improvement mini-series, and the first episode of that will be all the things electrically to do with the stock. But again, there's more things to purchase before I can even get on with that. So thank you for watching. I'll be back, and stay safe everyone. I'll see you again soon.